Welcome to Kaiser Watch with John Kaiser. I'm your host, Jim Goddard. John, what's coming up on the show today?
Jim, today we are going to revisit the James Bay Lithium area and talk a bit about what's going on there or what we can expect to go on there later this year.
So what's the status of the takeover bid for Azure Minerals, and what will it mean for Patriot Battery Metals?
Azure Minerals and Patriot Battery Metals are an interesting study in contrast. Now, Azure Minerals only began drilling at its Andover project in the Pilbara region of Australia in March of last year, after spending a year with boots on the ground mapping all these pegmatite outcrops that were LCT type. And since that period, they have drilled 248 core holes and 97 RC holes for over 100,000 meters. They have not yet published a resource estimate. That's expected in the second quarter of this year, with possibly a scoping study, which is what they call our PEAs, expected in the fourth quarter. But they became the subject of a takeover bid last year, initiated by SQM, the big Chilean lithium producer, and joined by Hancock Prospecting, which is Gina Reinhardt's company, and even Mineral Resources got into the fray. At the end, SQM and Hancock decided that they would make a joint bid, split it 50-50, and offer $3.70 a share. And since that time, the lithium carbonate price almost crashed through $6 a pound. There's been lots of hand-wringing and anxiety that we may be due for another lithium winter, such as we experienced in 2018 to 2020. And there was concern that the whole bid might fall apart as both parties stand back and say, oh, we don't have to pay this much right now. Now, the bid, Azure owns only 60% of the Andover project. Mark Creasy's group owns the other 40%, and that's a private group. So the bid is only for 60%. But at the price of $3.70 a share, they are in essence assigning a 2.5 billion Australian valuation to this project. And it's stuck. They have not canceled it. The meeting for the arrangement is set for April 8th. And if everything is approved, it will take place on April 18th. And not including the paper owned by SQM and Hancock, that should inject about $1 billion Australian into the pockets of Azure shareholders who still own the stock. Now, during this period, they have outlined two major areas within a 9 by 5 kilometer swarm of pegmatites. They've got multiple target areas, but the ones they're focused on are Target Area 1 and Target Area 3. Target Area 1, they estimate a range of 55 to 105 million tons, grading from 1% to 1.5% lithium oxide. And in Target Area 3, where they're doing a lot of drilling right now, they're estimating 25 to 75 million tons of similar grade. And this is quite impressive, especially when you consider that this has been accomplished in basically one year. Now, Patriot Battery Metals, on July 31st of last year, issued its maiden resource estimate, and it came in at 109 million tons of 1.42% lithium oxide. So that is actually at the upper end of the Target Area 1 projection that Azure has made. And yet its market valuation right now is 1.2 billion Canadian. And if you convert the Australian valuation of 2.5 billion at the current exchange rate, which is about 1.16 Australian for 1 Canadian dollar, you end up with a $2.2 billion valuation for the Andover project on a 100% basis. So something's not quite right here. Patriot Battery Metals is priced at about maybe 50, 55, 60% of what Azure is all about. And and it's more advanced. Now, with the work that it's doing, hopes to have a new resource estimate in the second quarter of this year, and that will build on the CV5, which only covered 3,750 meters of strike. They've extended that to 4,400 meters, and they're marching the drill in the southwest direction toward the CV13 pegmatite, where they've also been doing a lot of drilling and have traced that for 2,300 meters. So when this all comes together, I think they could end up in the 150 to 200 million ton range, which is basically what the combined range of Azure's target area 3 and target area 1 are all about. And we should learn about that in the next quarter, maybe the middle of the next quarter. So and PMET also plans to have its update is going to be in the third quarter, sometime July or so not quite in the next quarter. But they also hope to have a pre-feasibility study done by the end of 2024. Looks like they want to skip the PEA. Maybe we'll get a PEA if the PFS isn't quite ready. But that will allow us to put some sort of a cost, CapEx and OpEx to that project to see what happens in this northern part of the James Bay area. And I think the discrepancy in the valuation is that the Andover project is very close to infrastructure, whereas the James Bay Corvette project is in a much more remote region. Australia has already demonstrated that it's very much in favor of supporting exploration and development of lithium projects. Canada is a bit of a stick in the mud. It talks a lot, but it doesn't do a lot. The federal government hands out money to the battery makers to build plants, but it hasn't really done anything to help with the exploration and development permitting cycle. So this is a interesting situation, which I think will resolve itself sometime in the next 3 months. And Patriot Battery Metal has already bounced off its 577 low that was set in early February. It's now at about $8.30. It peaked at 1774 last year in June, and it raised $109 million from Albemarle at $15.29 during the week after they released the resource estimate. So they are in great shape with $100 million working capital, don't need to dilute any further, and they are moving these projects along. Not only are they going to be updating this resource estimate to include the CV13, but they've got a new discovery, CV9, that they found at late last year that they are drilling away at, and they haven't reported any assays yet. And they've got other outcrops, CV8, CV10, CV11, CV12, that they will also be testing this year with, I think, eight drills. I don't know how many drills, a lot of drills out there working. Now, work will have to stop at the end of April because that's when the goose hunting season for the First Nations takes place. That's in May. But in any case, I think what we're seeing with this, the solidity of the Azure bid, which we can expect to close if the voters don't approve of it. There's this alternative 365 conditional bid that Hancock and SQM can make, which will then clean out the groups that are like not tendering their shares if they don't get the 90% that they need. And then we'll be looking at okay, why are these groups doing this when we've seen all this negativity with regard to the lithium supply and the EV sector in general. And I think what we're seeing is that SQM, which has been in the business of producing lithium forever, mainly from the Chilean brines, and Hancock, which is an iron ore company, they're both saying that these predictions of the IEA that we're going to need 600% more lithium supply by 2030 to meet the EV-related component of net zero emission goals, they're saying with their bid This is the reality, and they're also, because of the high grade that we're seeing at the Andover project, they're also saying if you deliver pegmatites in the 1 to 1.5% range, you'll be able to make money. Maybe not much at $5-6 a pound where lithium carbonate is now, but if you assume $10 a pound plus, in the absence of some direct lithium extraction miracle in the oil brine field sector, you're going to need that type of price in order to have the amount of supply needed by 2030 to make all those EVs happen that they are expecting.
When, if ever, will the James Bay Lithium Index develop an uptrend?
Well, I created the James Bay Lithium Index on August 1st. It now has 71 members, and my timing was not good because, of course, this was the summer of the fire closures last year. The biggest prospecting boom in Canada's history that I expected was unable to materialize because a large part of Quebec was on fire, including the James Bay area itself, where they couldn't even bother fighting the fires because the fires in the south were closer to communities. So all the assets, the resources went to firefighting there, and companies didn't get into the field until at the earliest sort of mid-August. Many of them didn't get in there until September. And then, of course, by October, we have winter coming, and they got chased out. So companies only got modest boots on the ground programs underway. So we lost an entire season. And so the big boom that I expected last year, it then did not happen. And then we saw the slump begin in September, October with the lithium carbonate prices. And that has been pretty brutal and sucking the air out of all the enthusiasm for the lithium pegmatite hunt in Canada. By February 13th, the index was down 46%. It's since then recovered somewhat, and it's down only 40%. But you knew things were not going to go well when, with the year started off, I had taken 3 of the more advanced James Bay Juniors at Patriot Battery Metals, Brunswick Exploration, and Winsome Resources, and made them 2024 favorites, and they promptly tanked. They were responsible for my Kaiser favorites index being down about 20% at one point. It's down only about 7-8% now because there has been some rebound. But I think for the general index, and I designed the index to include every junior that had land in the James Bay region, because of the novelty of this idea that these pegmatites, which had been historically been ignored as worthless. Now, keep in mind, in 2005, lithium was just a $200 million market. Last year, it was a $25 billion market, even at the lower price that we had last year for lithium carbonate. So the idea was any junior which bothered to mobilize boots on the ground and look could be lucky and have something sticking out of the ground that has historically ignored, that's LCT type, loaded with spodumene, and then you put a drill across it and then you extend it where it disappears under swamp or overburden, and lo and behold, you have something like a CV5 pegmatite, or what Azure has accomplished on its Andover project in Australia. So Patriot Battery Metals, with everything that's going on that I already described in the earlier part of this episode, I expect it to continue going up as people get comfortable with the idea that lithium carbonate prices probably have bottomed and are not going to plunge back below $3 a pound as it did in 2018-13. Winsome Resources has already published a resource estimate. It's not big enough, but they've been doing enough drilling and should be in a position to provide an updated resource later this year. Plus, their story is part of what's all going around them with say Midland and Rio Tinto to the east and others extending that whole area. All the pieces will eventually fit together. So I would expect Winsome Resources to also be trending higher by the time summer arrives. The big question for the whole lithium James Bay Lithium Index is Brunswick exploration, which is still sort of slumbering at this 45 cent level, to which it tanked from the $1.10 level it had reached last year when it was drilling the Mirage body. And right now, it is the bellwether for sentiment towards the James Bay Lithium Index. We need to see Brunswick deliver evidence that the Mirage pegmatites have grown. And they also tell us that they have found the source of the boulder field, which is not explained by the area where they are currently doing their drill program. So we need to see Brunswick redeveloped an uptrend and get people thinking, yes, the James Bay region is where you can make these grassroots discoveries out of nowhere, and Mirage is a grassroots discovery, and this idea that there's going to be dozens of world-class CD5 scale pegmatites in the James Bay region, this needs to get traction again. But with the winter drill program almost at an end, as I mentioned earlier, at the end of April, everything shuts down because that's when the goose hunting season begins for the First Nations. It's also a period of spring thaw and fogginess, and they don't really like to fly around and do work when there's a higher risk of having fog get in the way of where you're trying to get to. But with most of the companies not mounting drill programs, most of the companies not having got much boots on the ground, nothing's really going to happen with most of these juniors until July, when companies like Dios Exploration, which what little work they got done last year delivered disappointing results. But they only got to some of the projects that they have and not the ones that they were most keen about. So when they get back, well, that'll be July. It'll be September before we hear any serious news. So for the majority of the members of the James Bay Lithium Index, it's going to be a quiet period. We are not going to see that anticipatory buildup that we had last year until we got that terrible news that June weekend, say everything's been shut down because these forest fires are now out of control. There's uncertainty that this year there may be the problem again. Yes, a lot of the areas are burned out, so they can go in there and they'll be able to see after all the soot's been washed away by the rains, potential pegmatite outcrops that were hidden before. But if they cannot get the helicopters and airplanes to get in there because they've all been requisitioned to fight fires elsewhere, then this could be another lost season. So until we see that a real boots on the ground season is happening in the James Bay region, it's only going to be the more advanced companies that have drill programs underway, that have delivered discoveries, that have entered the delineation stage, that are going to get any traction. So we're not going to see a very visible improvement in the James Bay Lithium Index. Now, the other thing that needs to change is the sentiment towards the lithium sector. So we've had a lot of negative press this year about the slowing electric vehicle sales, people realizing that, well, ordinary people can't afford these electric vehicles, and even if they could, they really aren't practical for the needs of people who live in Canada and the United States, who have to drive long distances. The current crop of electric vehicles, they're not affordable. They don't have the range that people need, and they have too long a charging time. But all of that is changing, and in a sense, this slump, the stalling of the whole electric vehicle sales growth is a good thing, because the current crop of electric vehicles just isn't good enough for mass adoption. That needs to happen. That can only happen when there's a solid-state lithium-ion battery, such as the sort that Toyota talked about in May of last year, claiming a manufacturing breakthrough that allows it to use lithium metal as the anode instead of graphite. They talked about being able to have a car that can do 1,200 kilometers range on a 10-minute charge. The initial version will be some expensive Lexus-type company coming out in 27, 28. But the real goal for them will be in 2030 and beyond, when they can have a Camry-style car that delivers the same sort of range and charging time. And the charging time, the shortness is so critical because right now you rely on hooking up in some apartment building, parking lot, and then it's got to sit there for many hours. Gas stations, they're not really going to put in charging stations because how do you make money having some cars sit there for all this time? But over time, as the charging times go down, as the batteries get better for these electric vehicles, you're going to see these gas stations start to replace their gasoline pumps with charging stations. Somebody drives in for a 10-minute charge and off they go. We're entering this transition period, and we're seeing a lot of negativity within the Republican Party election, talking points that, there's a war on ICE cars, you need to oppose these electric vehicles, they're too expensive, they're not good enough, as good as the ICE cars, and that criticism is true. But this is a transitional thing that's happening. And Toyota is turning out to have been brilliant. It spent the past decade really focusing on its various hybrid plug-in car lines. These are now very popular. People are warming up to this idea of not paying through the nose for gasoline. When we get oil exploration happening with the shale oil, that's going to produce an abundance of natural gas, which is going to be used to make electricity. And with oil, you can't collect the carbon dioxide that comes out of the tailpipe. But with a power plant, you can do carbon sequestration strategies or carbon offsets so that even though you're using a fossil fuel to make electricity to power all these electric vehicles, you're not putting it into the atmosphere without either an offset or capturing it and putting it back into the ground. And you can tell that Toyota is really pumped about the electric vehicle future. They just did a deal on March 5th where they are buying out the 49% stake that they've shared with Panasonic in Prime Planet Energy Solutions since 1996. This is a battery-making entity. They're taking it completely in-house. It's been mainly making the batteries for their hybrid fleet of cars, but they are now obviously gearing up to make it for the fully battery electric type vehicles, a sector that they have shunned because Toyota is the biggest car maker in the world, and they knew that the batteries technology that they had just would never be acceptable to the masses. So they put their efforts into their hybrid line and focused on R&D to make the breakthrough to have a solid state battery. And so they're positioning themselves to really sell a lot of hybrids during the next 5-6 years for 2030 when they hopefully have a Camry-style affordable car that can deliver everything that people actually want from an electric vehicle. And another sign is they just, last October, they decided to add $8 billion to expand their North Carolina battery manufacturing facility, into which they'd already sunk about $6 billion. Although Toyota's a Japanese company, it makes all its cars that it sells to American consumers in the United States. So, there's a lot of hand-wringing about how Tesla is going to kill the Ford and GM, the American car makers who have only kind of half-heartedly invested in the electric vehicle sector, making useless things like an electric Hummer. Like who needs a beast like that? And Toyota is positioning itself as the Tesla killer for 2030 and beyond. Tesla obviously is watching, so it's going to be stepping up its game. So I don't think the electric vehicles are going to disappear. I think they will keep coming. And even Honda and Nissan, the second and third largest Japanese car makers after Toyota, they read the writing on the wall, and just this past week, they decided to team up to develop an electric vehicle that they will co-develop and co-sell because they see that they need the critical mass. They do not want themselves to be stuck with obsolete internal combustion engine cars. So they're also preparing for the EV future that's coming. And so this is all very good for the Canadian exploration sector because none of these pegmatites, not even CV5, is likely to be ready and in production before 2030. Just because Canada's a stick in the mud when it comes to permitting and all that, they haven't yet done what is necessary to speed things up without compromising quality. With the big exponential adoption not happening till 2030, but with one being able to do the math as to what's going to be required, because if it's solid state lithium-ion batteries that are powering these future EV fleets, we're going to need not 6 times as much lithium by 2030. We're going to need 12 times as much lithium. So even though we're in a slump now, we can still see how everything is going to unfold, and the critical missing piece is the reliable lithium supply that can be quantified in advance, where you don't have to guess about recharge cycles and salars or how well the lithium extraction from brine fields will eventually work. No, they want to see what's in the ground. And that goes back to Azure Minerals and SQM and Hancock's willingness to let that $2.5 billion bid stick and to take out this project and develop it as a major future supply of lithium. We're going to see Canada wake up to this, and we're going to see this sector, Lithium Mania 2.0, get rolling again, and the James Bay Lithium Index will be part of that process, though the companies that are just lifestyle or unable to raise money, they will be left behind, and that's going to be the fun part, is picking out the ones that are the serious companies doing work and finding and delineating major new pegmatites in Quebec.
John, thanks for the update.
You're welcome, Jim.
I'm Jim Goddard. Comments made on Kaiser Watch are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as a recommendation to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at kaiserresearch.com.